Do you remember a particular moment in time that you can pinpoint as the time when you just knew that music was going to be your career path?
Yeah, it was early on in high school that it became apparent to me that I would choose that. There were a couple of other things going on in my life that could have led in different directions, but that was the one thing that captured my imagination.
Right. Did you have any formal vocal training at all as a youngster?
Yes, I did.
You did?
Yes. And my vocal coach and teacher was quite upset when he when he discovered I wanted to do rock and roll.
Sure he was. Growing up in Detroit, obviously the Motown scene would have influenced you. Did you spend a lot of time witnessing some of the Motown acts?
From the very beginning, really. It couldn't be helped, and we in Detroit had sort of a blessing of a kind, because we would be the test market for any new product that was coming out for the various artists over the years that would come out of Motown. In other words, before they would send it out around the country, they'd test it out here in Detroit.
On the home crowd.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was our pleasure.
I'm sure it was. Any artists in particular that stand out to you that really grabbed
you?
From
the very beginning, I mean, other than Jackie Wilson, when Berry Gordy, before he decided to start his own record company, had a hand in one of Jackie Wilson's hits, and then he started his own company, and Smokey Robinson really had a song called Way Over There that I pretty much kicked off. It was the first big hit for Motown. And over the years, I say over the years, but you have to remember I'm still in my middle teens, I auditioned for Brian Holland, and that went okay, except they were very interested in having young people who were very adept at writing their own music. And I hadn't developed that skill just yet. And so that was a failing on my part, unable to get that. And then I think I did sign up with Thelma Gordy, who was Berry Gordy's ex-wife. She started a label about half a mile down Grand River from where the Motown outfit was located. I did a deal with her for about a year, did a little recording, but didn't release anything. And after that, I got involved in an urban black gospel label and recorded my first single on that label.
Right. Tell us how the Detroit Wheels all came together.
How did they come together?
Yeah.
I was working a little club in downtown Detroit, and every week there would be a different house band. And the reason for that was that the owner of the establishment was kind of cheap, and so what he would do would go and tell these bands that they were going to audition for the job, and they'd play for free the first weekend, and the next weekend he'd find somebody else to audition. So the Wheels, there were three of them at that point, happened to be one of the young groups that came through, and we liked the chemistry, we liked the performance, the way we worked together, and after the performance we talked and decided to start a rock and roll band.
And the move for you from Detroit to New York, it must have been a huge step at such a young age. Looking back now, how do you think you coped with it?
I don't think I personally coped with it very well. I was overwhelmed, and it's easy enough to do when you're young and you come into a city and you look up to the sky and you can see no daylight because of the massive amount of buildings. I think we struggled to deal with it at first, and then once we accepted the fact that we were a little more important than we were prior to going to New York, we knuckled down and started doing little clubs around Greenwich Village and playing around Manhattan, and then branching out and working in the state of New York, because the management, of course, was located in New York, and those were the kind of jobs they were getting us.
You recall the first time you heard yourselves on radio?
Well, that goes back to Detroit.
Yeah.
When I did the gospel record. It was quite a wonderful feeling driving away from the station where we had just hand delivered the recording, and then driving away from the station and hearing yourself on the radio. It was very pleasing. Sorry.
Does it still feel that good when you hear yourself on radio?
Yeah, but I had to learn. In order to do that, I had to learn to speak German. So, I mean, they still play my songs here in America on the what we call the oldies station.
Yeah, we've got them here too. Yeah.
Yeah, but for hearing the stuff that I've done more recently, they play it in Europe, in Germany specifically. And I do enjoy. Once I was sitting at a nice cafe in Paris, and one of my songs came over the radio that they were running in the restaurant, and that was pretty neat too.
Pretty cool. Whose idea it was to fuse CC Ryder and Jenny together?
That was we were maintaining right down to our dying day that was our idea. We've heard other scenarios about how that was invented, but we know that we had developed that system of doing songs for our club act because we truly hated to stop and finish a song and then start another one. So we found a way to sort of just to run them together.
You managed very well to create the spirit and feel of a live performance on a studio recording. Did you do anything special to assist that?
Well, we brought our energy in there.
Yeah.
We pretty much were given the opportunity to record in the manner in which we performed, and the mics were set up appropriately for that purpose in the studio. And the session that our first hit came out of, Jenny Take a Ride, was done in a huge studio in New York called Stay Phillips, and it was the ballroom of a hotel with an immense sort of a very tall ceiling, and so the natural echo was there, and the sound was incredible. And I think it was that particular session that we were working and doing the album, and in the control booth were various members of the Rolling Stones.
I get the impression that maintaining a quality of live performance, just reading about you, I get the feeling that maintaining a quality of live performance is a high priority for you. Would that be a fair comment?
Well, that was pretty much our selling point, and so it was important to us, and it was something we did well. When I look back on the career, we didn't become popular because of any deep lyrics that we were creating. It was the atmosphere and the feeling of the records, and the beat that our young drummer provided that propelled us into fame.
What were the circumstances surrounding your departure from the Wheels?
Well, I'll try to condense it for you. There was a fundamental disagreement between the guitar player and myself. And let me preface that by saying that early on, as we got together, I had a solo act. My name was Billy Lee, and they had a group named the Rivieras, and so we became Billy Lee and the Rivieras. And with all these flood of groups coming over from England, they were all sort of one-name groups, you know.
Yeah.
And so the band wanted to integrate to dump Billy Lee and just make us sort of one group with a group name, just like our English counterparts. And I resisted that because I had worked very hard up to that point to establish myself as a solo artist. And so I retained my name, and that kind of didn't sit well with them. And then I had a vision for how the group should go, and I very much loved rhythm and blues, American rhythm and blues. And I wanted to add some horns, and the guitar player wanted to keep the band simple, without horns. He wanted just to have a guitar band. And that sort of opened the door for our management then at that time to come in and sow some seeds of discontent, and they had sort of a vision of how I would become famous in America, and that was to sort of put me on the Tom Jones Cabaret tour. And they succeeded in breaking up the group, although when we did first break, the drummer was intending to come with me and changed his mind at the last moment. so we went on, and I formed this huge band, which was, well, I guess I've answered your question.
Yeah. That cabaret scene, though, that wasn't really your preference of direction, though, was it?
No, but the reason I bought into it was the fact that it did intrigue me. I love all facets of entertainment, and I had seen some artists work in that setting, and even some of my heroes were, some of my black artist heroes were working in that setting, and I looked at it as another challenge, really. But I didn't care for the contrived aspect of it. And I didn't realize what a fundamental difference there was between contriving something and doing something natural.
Yeah.
But it hit me quite early on, and the idea of doing that big band thing was a noble attempt on my part. But because I had an inner turmoil over it and hadn't resolved it within myself, it was doomed to defeat.
Do you think maybe it had the effect of alienating some of your old fans?
I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
Quite sure it did. But, even then I understood that if you are going to make any changes in your life, you can't stop and worry about what the public thinks. You probably will be able to live and go on with your life after having made a mistake, but I would much rather have made a mistake than to not attempt it.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about the Detroit-Memphis experiment with Steve Cropper. That must have been an exciting project to work on.
Yeah, it was. It was a very, very nice thing. Having been a fan of Booker T and the MGs for the longest time, and all of those wonderful artists that came out of Otis Redding and Irma Thomas, and all the people that Sam and Dave, that Stax Volt system down in Memphis. And so it was a real privilege, actually, to be allowed to go down there. Unfortunately, the problem we ran into there was it was a time thing. I hadn't had what I thought was an appropriate amount of time to sort of mesh into their system of doing things, and it kept me kind of off guard to record everything in 1 week. And we would go, they had a writing pool, and every morning Steve Cropper and I would go around to each cubicle where the writers were seated with their instruments and gather up whatever songs they had created the night before, take a listen to them, pick one to record that day, one or two. And that system was kind of like, it didn't allow me the time to understand there are a couple tracks on that album that you can sense that it did happen, that I was able to get into the flow of the atmosphere of the music that was being created. But for the most part, there's some wonderful rhythm tracks on that Detroit-Memphis experiment.
I guess also it must have been a great relief to be back working with the type of music that you really felt comfortable with again too, after the cabaret experiment, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it was. It was sort of a life-saving thing. But then if you followed the career, you'll see that I did another sort of a 90-degree turn and went off and started another rock and roll group called Detroit. And that was a fine rock and roll group, except at that point in my life I was heavily involved in drugs and had no good sense about where I was and what I was doing. And we did a fine album, but we weren't able to sustain it because everybody was too messed up. The group literally burned out, living its image.
I believe you had a bit of a throat problem that put you out of action for a while in the 70s. Is that right?
Well, there's, I actually tried to, went after the guy that started that rumor, and he died. and so I guess I had no hand in his death. But I was kind of like, if one of your enemies dies, you kind of just like, hey, okay, there is a God. So,
that's a myth, is it?
huh?
That didn't happen at all. That's a myth, is it?
It did happen.
It did.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the throat thing?
Yeah.
No, there was no. It was
right.
it was an erroneous rumor. And what had occurred was then whatever work, because I was messed up and had no management at the time and no direction, I was just sort of floundering around. It was hard to get work. And so when a report comes out like that, it just about destroys any chance you would have.
Yeah, make it near impossible to get work.
Yeah, and so I was upset over that and attempted to sue this guy, and that was going through the court system, and then he died. So.
Right. And his rumors are still going around. Yeah?
Well, no. I've done all that I can beyond becoming a national bright light again to squelch those rumors. And by what I mean is that I continue to do very good performances, and the vocals are very good and strong. And so if anybody wanted to buy that rumor, then they would find out that they got cheated.
Yeah. How's your relationship with record companies been over the years?
I don't even attempt a relationship with record companies in America.
Not worth the effort.
Well, when you consider that there's, 3 decades of musicians starting from 16 all the way up to my age, and beyond my age actually, competing for a very small pie, relatively speaking, it does take a lot of effort and time. And then you have the understanding that I am sort of against. I feel about organized recording companies like I feel about organized religion, and I don't find room for that, either one of those things in my life.
You mentioned earlier Germany is quite a good market for you. What do you mainly put that down to?
I contribute that to a satellite performance we did out of Germany on one evening in '78. And it was a very sort of there were 3 acts. I believe there was Southside Johnny, Niels Lofgren, and myself, and I was very excited about it because they told me I'd get to headline the show. What they didn't tell me is that I had to go on at 3 a.m. in the morning. And so by the time we got on there, we had partaken of a few drinks and were feeling kind of rambunctious about the whole affair. And so we got on and did a great performance. And the audience loved it. And at that point, that time in the morning, they had started with 126 million viewers, but when it got to us, there was probably about 25 to 30 million people still sort of hanging on in the wee hours of the morning. And the performance and the interview I did were kind of I don't know, a lot of people were offended by it, and the record company was offended by it. My manager at that time was offended by it. And he was like, after the show was over, he was getting in my case, telling me that I'd ruined this gentleman's career, the guy that owned the record company, that I had sabotaged my own career, and that he didn't want any part of me, and that he was calling it quits. So we drove all the way back to Hamburg where we were staying, and I was feeling very depressed for a couple of days, and I didn't really think I had done anything wrong. And over those 2 days, all these record orders started coming in from the people that had witnessed the performance, and an inordinate amount of requests to buy the record. And this is what I tell you about show business. I hate it for this reason. Those people that had disowned me and told me I had killed their career and sabotaged them, now with all these record orders coming in, all of a sudden they're forgiving and they want to be my friend, And I just can't stand the hypocrisy that goes on. But anyway, to answer your question, that's how it started.
That's how it started. And how long ago was that?
That would be 78, 79 for the German, for Line Records, yeah.
I believe you've been working on an autobiography.
I am, not as we speak, but I'm looking at what I've accomplished so far.
How's it coming along?
Well, anytime you have to face your past and do it sort of in an honest fashion, it's not easy. So I try, and it's I have 75 pages so far, something like that.
And of course, the story's still continuing anyway. So.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take it up to the point where when I have to deliver it. So.
What's the extent of your live work these days, Mitch?
My library?
Your live work.
Oh, my live work. Yeah. This year we did 97 dates.
Types of venues you're playing?
Most of our venues are festivals or outdoor concerts. We call them bug fests. And they're city-sponsored events or just pretty much outdoor stuff with outdoor stages, and that's most of our work.
Yeah, and you're finding it's a good blend of old and new fans coming to see you?
I'm finding that the portion of the crowd that is younger, and by that I mean probably in late teens and early 20s, middle 20s, they are fascinated by what we do. I think because we do it well, and they didn't expect it. And I think the attitude that we have been able to retain is important, is an important selling tool to the younger people.
Cool. Could you just run through the background of some of the guys in your current band?
In the current band?
Yeah.
Well, I have the original drummer with me. He, of course, I explained, was in that group, the Rivieras. He was 14 years old when we did our first recording. When you listen to the music, it's a phenomenal accomplishment on his part. The bass player has been with me now about 10 years. He's not the original bass player. The original bass player hasn't picked up a bass in over 35 years.
Wow.
And on guitar, I have Robert Gillespie, and he's a very good player. He's been with a lot of the outstanding local groups. I generally draw my talent from the Detroit area because it does exist, and why go further? And the original guitar player for the Wheels is a wonderfully gifted guitar player. He does a blues thing around town, but he can't travel comfortably because he had an accident, and a garage door came down on his head and screwed up his neurological system to some degree, so he doesn't feel real safe going on tours. But he does play around town, and he has somebody with him or cares about him that if there is trouble will take care of him. The original rhythm player from the Detroit Wheels died from cancer, so he's not with us anymore. And I have on keyboards a very talented fellow named Rico, who's from South America. So that's the band as it stands.
I guess one of the things that must be really satisfying for you looking back is some of the artists such as John Cougar Mellencamp and Bruce Springsteen, among others, who cite you as a major influence on them. That must be a great feeling.
Yes. One answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
What more can you say? What kind of music are you listening to these days?
Well, that's a real loaded question because I listen to just about anything that the dial turns over. As far as names, there is no one group right now that I really care about. More than that, what's upsetting me today, anyway, as the sun rises slowly over Detroit, we had a classical station here, and it got bought up by a rock and roll outfit, and they turned it into a rock station with alternative music called The Edge. And so now you have a great sort of a urbane or cosmopolitan city as big as Detroit, with all of its clashing cultures, and no classical music. I can't believe a city this size couldn't support a classical music station.
It's a strange thought, yeah.
Yeah. You wonder sometimes. So that bone kind of stuck in my craw, and so I didn't, I just say to myself, geez, the music's really fucked up around here now, and it is.
Okay, Mitch, look, I won't keep you too much longer. Just looking back, would there be anything you'd like to go back and change given the opportunity? Any regrets at all?
Well, there was that little redhead in the third grade that taught me how to tie my shoes. And if I could go back and kind of, ask her to marry me back in the third grade, which she probably wouldn't have done because her parents wouldn't have let her, that's what I would change.
Right, and that would have changed everything that followed. What are your plans for 98, Mitch?
We are going to, of course, the book is going to be coming out. That's the autobiography, and the concurrent biography will be coming out at the same time. So that's going to be very interesting to sort of use them for bookends myself. One will be the truth from an objective point of view, and one will be the truth from a subjective point of view. So, yeah, this is the year of the book, and of course we'll continue to work. Things are always slow in the wintertime here, but they pick up in late spring and go full bore all the way to the late fall. So that's on tap. I have a CD that I'm putting out, which I recorded with some boys from New York. It's quite a wonderful musical experiment, and it turned out really well. It's sort of in the vein of what they call ambient industrial. If you live in New York, that's what they would call it. It was quite a radical change for me, and so I'm very pleased with the results of that. We'll be trying to get that out, and other than that, nothing. We'll be doing nothing.
Oh, sounds pretty busy just the same. Certainly hope you can squeeze a Down Under visit in there somewhere. Certainly be welcome down here. We'd love to see you.
Well, sure, we'd love to come. I don't know too much about Australia, other than the fact that I love any country that was founded by criminals. So that would be very pleasing to me, and also the fact that it's pretty much the same. I always have likened the Australians to early Americans, and I don't know if your people there are offended by that sort of comparison, but I'm not alone in my feelings. A lot of people feel that the Australians are sort of a very adventurous type of people, and they're a new breed, historically speaking, and so we look with interest from here at Australia.
Oh, that doesn't offend us at all. It takes a lot to offend us, Dan. We're a pretty easygoing group.
Well, you guys could live in Detroit.
Okay, Mitch, all the best. Thanks for your time so early in the morning there.
No
Much
problem.
appreciated. Thanks for 30 years of great rock and roll. And we'll be here waiting for you when you do make it down.
Okay.
Okay, all the best. Okay, cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.